California's in an exceptional earthquake drought. When will it end? Los Angeles, California is in an earthquake drought. It has been almost 5 years since the state experienced its last earthquake of magnitude 6 or stronger in Napa, Southern California. Experts know this calm period will eventually end, with destructive results. They just don't know. Earthquake. Scientists have been warning California of seismic dangers, be it the big one on the San Andreas Fault or catastrophes that could come from lesser-known faults, such as Hayward or Newport Inglewood. One reason for the urgent alerts: memories of a truly destructive quake in many urban areas have faded. And with that, experts say California ignores these realities at its own peril. Consider how much quieter California has been in regard to earthquakes of magnitude 6 or greater. In the last 25 years, there have been 11 such temblors statewide. In the last quarter century, there have been 3 such earthquakes that shook California's 10 southernmost counties. In the prior the greater San Francisco Bay Area has been particularly quiet. Since the Great Ninth, earthquakes must happen at some point to relieve the immense tectonic forces that are pushing part of the state northwest toward Alaska and the rest southeast toward Mexico. On average, there may be periods when a time of elevated seismic activity will come is hard to say. Some thought scientists have been particularly focused on the lack of major seismic activity on several California faults that as a group produce the most frequent earthquakes on the plate boundary: the San Andreas, San Jacinto, and Hayward. They are the ones, yet they've been exceedingly quiet. AUSGS. Ordinarily, there are roughly 3 to 4 of these earthquakes on these faults every 100 years. The 1800s, by comparison, was a far more active time for earthquakes. That century saw earthquake. Scientists have been buzzing for years about California's hiatus in supersized earthquakes, thinking the chances of such a 100-year gap between ground-shattering seismic events to be improbable. Scientists focus on earthquakes that literally break the ground along the main plate boundary because they're the ones that actually do the job of relieving centuries of tectonic strain. A famous example: some quakes don't do that job. The 1980 only sections of the San Andreas, San Jacinto, and Hayward faults that have 1,000 years worth of data on earthquakes were included in the analysis because the authors needed that data to look for periods of seismic activity and inactivity. Although there have been more mild seismic storms in recent memory. The earthquake storm in the 80s and 90s is clearer in hindsight, said Caltech seismologist Egil Haukson. It began with the WID. In the 75 years before the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake, there were 14 earthquakes of magnitude 6 or greater in the Bay Area, according to geophysicist Ross Stein. In the 75 years before the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake, there were 14 earthquakes of magnitude 6 or greater in the Bay Area, according to geophysicist Ross Stein. More severe periods of earthquake activity were seen in the 19th century. Mission San Juan, the first came in 1800 from a quake on the San Jacinto Fault east of Temecula. Then, in there are other examples of frequent major earthquakes. In the 1500s, Turkey shows how a region can be affected by an above-average rate of earthquakes that persists for generations. 1930. Sometimes there was a 30-year gap between big quakes. Sometimes, the most recent catastrophic earthquake was a magnitude 7.4 that cost more than 17,000 deaths. The 1990s, Istanbul. While Istanbul might be on alarm for a future big one, many Californians are out of practice. The last time California has seen an earthquake as powerful as a magnitude 7.8 was in 1857 in Southern California and 1906 for Northern California. No one alive today. For instance, The magnitude 6.7 North Ridge quake of 1994, which severely shook just a fraction of Los Angeles County, would pale in comparison with a magnitude 7.8 quake on the San Andreas. That would produce if a sudden jump in how often earthquakes come can make recovery difficult. New Zealand's South Island has faced elevated seismic activity for 16 years and it's still not over, even after a magnitude 6.3 Christchurch earthquake of 2011 caused the deaths of 185 people and collapsed many buildings. 4 months after the February 22, 2011, earthquake, a magnitude 6 hit southeast of Christchurch. Then a 5.8. The constant shaking caused significant impact to people's mental and social health rates. Experts say it's important that Californians are psychologically prepared for the prospect of a new era of earthquakes. That means not only having an emergency plan and supplies, said McBride, now a social scientist for the USGS Earthquake Early Warning System, but also mentally imagining what that will mean, not just putting a flashlight and shoes next to the bed, for instance, but understanding that will mean dealing with broken glass on the floor and a power outage that may last weeks or more, and planning for how your family will get through it. If strong quakes on 3 of California's most feared faults. 1800, San Jacinto Fault, magnitude 7.2 damaged walls at missions in San Diego and San Juan Capistrano. 1812, southern San Andreas and parts of San Jacinto Fault, magnitude 7.5 destroyed the Great Stone Church at Mission San Juan Capistrano, killing more than 40 people attending Mass. 1838, northern San Andreas Fault, magnitude 7.4 damage reports from San Francisco to Santa Clara, fault likely ruptured between Woodside on the peninsula, south of San Francisco to Watsonville. 1857, southern San Andreas Fault, magnitude 7.8 ruptured fault from southern Miss Monterey County to Cajon Pass in San Bernardino County. Damage reported. 1868, Hayward Fault, magnitude 7.0 30 dead, causing $350,000 in property damage in the Bay Area. 1890, northern San Andreas Fault, magnitude 6.8 east of Watsonville. Damage was reported. 1906, northern San Andreas Fault, magnitude 7.8 Great San Francisco earthquake. The San Andreas. 1918, San Jacinto Fault, magnitude 6.5 ruptured the fault southeast of Hemet in Riverside County. Source: U.S. Geological Survey, California Geological Survey. Visit the Los Angeles Times at
Raindrops, truck top, smoking, no cooking the hot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that.